right, good evening, my ducks. Guess what? You get another NTI snow day tomorrow. And as a result, I'm going to be teaching our next lesson for persuasive writing to you all via the computer. So today we're going to be talking about something else that we add into our writing when we write persuasively. And its purpose is different than the others that we have talked about before, because this thing that we're adding has one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to grab the attention of the person who is reading our persuasive piece and hooking them into what we're trying to say. Because, you know, we may have really important stuff to say to people, but if we don't have their attention, then they may or may not pay attention to us. So this attention grabbing technique that we're going to be discussing today is called a hook. And I'm going to go into a sharing mode so I can kind of show you the definitions. And my expectation is that you all have out your packet and that you take notes on these new terms as I discuss them with you. And then we're going to do a little bit of practice together. And then you will have a journal to complete based on that information. Okay, so let me go ahead and share my screen and I will explain to you how we grab the attention of our readers. Okay. All righty, so sharing my screen and flipping over here to the presentation. All right, so attention grabbing techniques, which we call hooks. Because just like a fisherman will try to hook a fish and reel them in, when we write persuasively and we use hooks, we're trying to grab the attention of the reader and reel them in. So there are actually 5 that we're going to discuss, and I guarantee that you've probably heard of at least 2 of them before, and that's good, but there are more, and it's time for us to expand a little bit about the tools in your toolbox of the ways that you can get people's attention. So let's start off with the ones that are more basic that you may have used before, and then we'll talk about a couple of new ones that you can use to do the same thing. So the first one I want to talk about is a quotation. And when we start our papers or our paragraphs with a quotation, what we are doing is we're using an illuminating and relevant quote. So let me say what I mean by illuminating and relevant. So illuminating comes from the word illumination. It's light. We're shedding light on something. And so if you use a quote, the first qualification that it should have is that it should illuminate. It should shed light on the issue that you're about ready to talk about, so that it's intriguing to the reader. It can't just be something that doesn't have a spark. It has to be illuminating. It also has to be relevant. That means it has to be on topic. You can't just have a random quote about Barbie dolls if your topic's on plastic pollution. It has to relate in some way to what you are discussing. Why bother using a quotation, you might be asking? What makes them powerful? Well, quotations are most powerful when you use either one of 2 types of people and what they have said. Either you use someone who is very well known, like a celebrity or somebody who is sort of known for that type of topic. This could be either a celebrity or perhaps a president, like Abraham Lincoln. His words might be quite powerful. Or it can be an expert. So for example, a scientist or the Center for Disease Control might have a quote that you would find important enough to include in your piece. So when you think about a quote, you should be thinking about, has somebody well-known said something about this? Because someone might listen to Abraham Lincoln or Justin Bieber, even if they don't listen to me. And when they see that Justin Bieber thinks the same thing as me, that will give my words more weight. Or is there a scientist or an organization who has done research on this whom I can quote? And if the answer is yes, that's very powerful too. Now, maybe a quote isn't for you though. So here's the one that I think you all have definitely used before. It's the rhetorical question. What is a rhetorical question? Well, it's a question that makes a point without needing an answer. It doesn't require an answer to do what questions should do. So for example, let's say that you're trying to convince parents to make sure their kids are buckled up properly before they drive in a car. So you could start a paper about the importance of buckling up with a question like, do you want your kid to die in a car accident? Well, that doesn't need an answer because we know what the answer is. The answer is no, of course they don't want their kid to die in a car accident. But it works as a rhetorical question to grab the attention of that reader, because what it does is it activates the brain. Now, we've talked about this before, how our brain is a magical box and it loves to do things like categorize and predict. It also loves to answer questions. And so even if the answer is obvious on the face of it, if you ask a question, the brain is going to automatically answer, and it's going to feel real smart for doing so. So if you say, do you want your kid to die in a car accident? Your brain's reaction is going to be to go, no, of course not. I don't want my kid right. I don't want to do that. And that answering of the question engages the mind. And so these are very clever because, as simple as they are, a rhetorical question engages in an automatic way. You don't need somebody's permission to engage their brain with a question. So rhetorical questions, I'm sure you've done these before, but there's more. There's more ways to grab attention than just these two things. So let's talk about another one. All right, so this is one of the two big ones for this year because it involves creative writing, which is something that we have talked about earlier in the year, and how being able to write creatively is very effective. Sorry if you see my cat's tail, she wants to be involved in the lesson too. So this word that you see here is pronounced anecdote. It's got kind of a sound in it, an anecdote. And what an anecdote is it is a story, a true story that sheds light on or provides context for the issue. So the thing about an anecdote is that it has to be true, okay? So if you can tell a true story about your issue, about a real person, something that actually happened, that is very powerful. Because we really rely a lot on the experiences of people like us. Like, for example, when you go and buy something on Amazon, do you often look at the reviews at the bottom? When you purchase an app from the App Store, do you go and you read the reviews before you download it? That's us looking at anecdotes. We're looking at testimonials from other real human beings. Oh, bless you, baby. So here's an example. Remember that seatbelt thing I told you about with our rhetorical question? Do you want your kid to die in a car accident? An example of how you could start that same persuasive piece with an anecdote is to say something like this. Julia Andrews was getting ready to take her child to school on February the 14th, 2019. She put her kid in her car seat, but forgot to check the buckle before getting into her own seat and driving off. As a result of this, when the car hit her in the side, she survived, but her child did not. If you explain those, it should sound sort of like a news story or a interview. There we go, an interview. And some of the things that make it clear that it's a true story is it will have things like, it will have real dates, or it will have people's first and last names, or it will refer to real places in the world. So when you see those things, you're going to know, okay, this is a true story. And if you can find a true story to start off your persuasive piece, that's going to be really effective. All right, let's go on to the next one. So maybe you don't have a true story because sometimes we just can't find true stories. Another option that works really, really well is to write a description. And a description is a sensory or elegant description which sets the scene for what is to come. So in a way, this is also a story, but it doesn't have to be true. It can be made up. And it is especially effective if the topic that you're going to discuss relates to a setting that you could describe. So, for example, if you were talking about plastic pollution and you described a beach that was, covered with stringy nets of garbage and bits of plastic mixed into the sand. And if you described, a bird struggling to get out of a plastic bag, those would be things that would create, a description that can be very powerful. And you can use your sensory details for this, what things smell like, sound like, taste like, feel like. And this allows you to use those good creative skills, which I know that you have. Now, the thing about a description or an anecdote is that they tend to be longer. They can be maybe a whole paragraph all by themselves, whereas a rhetorical question or a quote is probably going to be more like one sentence. So if you use an anecdote or a description, expect them to be longer because that's just how they work. Now, there is one more type of hook that we sometimes use, and it is a fact. So a fact is numbers or statistics, or maybe a shocking piece of information. So statistics is a word I want to make sure that you can define. Okay, so a statistic is a fact, but it's a fact with the numbers. So maybe it's a percentage, or maybe it's a ratio, like 1 out of 4 people, blah, blah, blah. So it's got to be a fact, it's got to be true, but it's got to be numbers. So facts are numbers and statistics, or a shocking piece of information. So let me give you an example about how this might be a really good choice. It works really well if you have a statistic that's quite intense. So like maybe your statistic that was about seatbelts, it might be about the number of car accidents that there are that result in fatalities because of seatbelts not being put on correctly. That might be a shocking percentage to present to your reader. However, facts also work really well when they're kind of funny or entertaining. So if I was going to write, for example, a piece about sewage in Louisville, which by the way, that's actually kind of a serious problem in Louisville right now. Our sewer system downtown is really, really outdated and it's caused some road collapses. But you know what? If I'm writing that paper for a middle school audience, how am I supposed to get middle schoolers interested in plumbing? That's a difficult sell for a topic. So maybe I decide I want to start it off with a funny fact to get them interested. So I might start it off by saying something like, did you know that the inventor of the toilet was a guy named John Crapper? And that is kind of funny, especially to an audience of middle schoolers. And that might then make them go, really? Oh, okay, well, let's read a little further. And then maybe I can get them into the subject of sewage and plumbing. So this is it, guys. These are the 5 types of hooks that we use when we write persuasively to start off our pieces. It's going to be the very first thing we actually write, even before we talk about the issue. We use this to grab the attention of the reader. And then once we have their attention, we're able to explain the issue and then go on to talk about our position and our arguments. So let's practice. You all should have written that down in your notes. So you know the 5 things, they're right there down in front of you. I'm going to now give you some real life examples, and I want you to see if you can guess which of the 5 types of hook that I am using. Okay, so it's fine with me if you do it in your head, but make sure you do it. All right, because I want you to really test yourself on this. Let's take a look at them. Here's the first. Plastic shopping bags take between 20 and 1,000 years to break up. This means that an animal can decompose inside one, and then the bag will be free to kill another animal again and again. All right, so what type of hook is this? Take a look at your notes and make a guess. I'm going to give you 5 seconds to think about it. All right, let's see if you were correct. This was a fact. That's right. So hopefully you noticed, I'm going to go back so you can kind of see it. You notice that this has some statistical information here. We have 20 to 1,000 years to break up. That's some numbers, guys. That numbers tells us about how long it's going to take this plastic bag to decompose. It's factual, it's numerical, and it makes the point very well. So that is a fact. All right, how about this one? Have you ever wondered what the most commonly seen man-made object is in the sea? It's not boats or buoys or submarines, it's plastic bags. So think about it. What type of hook is being used to get the attention of the audience here? All right, if you guessed rhetorical question, you are correct. That started off with a question, and the question was, have you ever wondered what the most commonly seen man-made object is in the sea? This doesn't require an answer for you. Your brain is either going to go yes, or it's going to go no. And that is engagement automatically, which is what makes rhetorical questions so simple, but powerful. All right, how about this one? American cities are like badger holes ringed with trash, wrote author John Steinbeck as he traveled across country in the 1960s, observing the changes taking place as packaging and plastic became king. All right, so what is this? 5 seconds. All right, hopefully you got this one. It is a quotation, absolutely. So if you saw the quotation marks and you saw that it was credited to someone, said John Steinbeck, pretty obviously a quote. Now, try this one. The mother albatross hopelessly nudges her motionless infant with her beak. Its flightless, fuzzy wings are sprawled, its swollen belly filled with the bits of plastic she has brought him. So 5 seconds. Okay, let's see if you're right. The answer was description. Yes. Now, this might have happened somewhere. It could be true, like that there's a mommy albatross out there nudging her little baby. But that's not something we can verify. You can't do an interview of a mommy albatross. So this is probably the writer wanting to explain a real life situation by describing it creatively. And so they're trying to evoke some emotions here. We've got lots of descriptive words like this fuzzy, flightless little wings. Oh, and its swollen little belly. So this is a description. It uses good sensory details to try to get to the heart of the reader. But as far as we know, this is not true. It's a creative writing piece, not factual. And that's what makes a description different from an anecdote, which has to be true. All right, let's take a look at this last one. Everything changed the day I got to visit the dump in person and see for myself where the trash I used was going. All right, this one, of course, was an anecdote. And we know it's an anecdote in this case because if you look at it, it says I. It may not have any dates or names in this one, but since the person is saying that they personally did it, we know it's a true story. They're not making it up. And so this is an example of an anecdote. And actually, it probably would have gone even more and gotten more interesting and descriptive, but it's an example. All right, so now that we have discussed the 5 types of hooks, and hopefully you've taken good notes and had some practice here, it's time for you to be a little bit creative and see if you can come up with some hooks of your own. So what I'm going to have you all do is, this is actually journal 4, excuse me, you've already done journal 3. So you're going to write a hook for each of the following persuasive pieces. Although these are pretend persuasive pieces, of course, you're not actually going to write anything about these, except for like the first sentence or maybe a few sentences. So the hint that I'm going to give you is you have to make up some of the facts and details. Now, feel free to do a little research on your own if you want to and find some real facts and statistics or a real quote, but I don't require you to do that. You can make something up. So let's just take a look at the first one so you understand what I mean. So the first one says the school is now doing random locker searches for drugs and weapons. Okay, so pretend that you're going to write a persuasive piece about that topic. Okay, so if you're going to write about that topic and you're going to start it with a hook, of course, because you want to grab your reader's attention, what would your hook be? And you can see there from the parentheses that I want you to write a rhetorical question. I want you to practice starting a piece with a rhetorical question. So if I was going to do this, I'd have to think first. I have to think, okay, if the school was doing this, if they were doing random locker searches for drugs and weapons, would I be for that or against that? Well, it doesn't matter. You can pick either one, whichever one you think is the funniest. So let's say that you're against it. How could you start your piece with a rhetorical question? Oh, you know what? I want to be for it. Let's pretend that I'm for it. So I'm for these locker checks, and I've decided I'm going to try to convince parents to support it. That sounds like a fun one. So what question could I ask at the beginning that would convince parents and grab their attention about what I'm going to write about? I could say something like, do you want your student to be surrounded by drugs and weapons at school? That's going to grab their attention. And then maybe that would allow me to later in this pretend piece, go on to write about why they should be actually okay with random locker searches. Okay, so be a little bit creative. You got to think a bit about what you might actually write if you were really going to write this, and then write how you would start it. I would say that number 1, which is the rhetorical question, number 4 and number 5, which is the fact and the quotation, that's probably just going to be 1 sentence long. Probably doesn't need to be more than that. However, your number 2 and your number 3, where you're practicing writing a description and an anecdote, those are probably going to be a few sentences long, because how can you write, a little descriptive piece or a little anecdote without giving yourself, a bit of time? So this is kind of a creative writing exercise you're going to be doing, and you can actually do this assignment next. It actually is in the Google form, not on this slide. Okay, so just look below this video and you will see a space for you to complete the journal. Do your very best, and if you have any questions, you can just email me. Okay, all right, good luck, and I will see you all probably on Friday. Okay, all right.